Hi folks, you're with Tass at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about a new fad. It's a new thing. It's called leisure racism, or leisure in the American pronunciation, and it goes something like this: that if you're particularly a white woman, I mean, black women to some extent, but if you're a white woman who's married to a rich or well-to-do, well-off partner, or boyfriend or whatever, a partner, and this guy is so well off that you don't need to work, and you can stay at home, and have a very high standard of living, going out shopping and buying the $100 organic pots of honey and so on, and having all the brand label clothes and going to the tennis parties and living that sort of I don't know, what would you call it, social butterfly lifestyle. If you can do that and you choose not to work because you don't need to, you choose not to work, really you're engaging in racist enslavement. Wait for this, racist enslavement of minorities. Well, how, you gasp? How am I doing that? Well, if you're a woman in such a position, the job that you're not doing, because chances are you're just a bimbo who would have done some shit job, except you just happen to be good looking enough to, hook up with a rich guy. So you give up your shit job to be a leisure princess. And that means a black person or brown person will have to do that, in all probability will have to do that job. So you have really, what you've done is you forced a minority woman to go and do that work that you choose not to do because you don't need to, that you choose not to do. So that means it's a racist thing because the white girl gives up the shit job, which means the colored person has to do this shit job. So that's racism. And what's more, it's fucking slavery. And if you've done that, white chick, then you're a damn fucking Nazi. You're Hitler. So that's the new fad. Now, it's hard to sort of work through the logic on that because the amount of assumptions and assertions that sort of in somersaults and mental gymnastics that have to go into that would be mental gymnastics that have to go into that would be worth an essay on its own. But that's the new thing. Now, if you look at how many people are wealthy enough to do that, to live that lifestyle, like in Australia, for example, and this includes people who've inherited very nicely. It's less than 5%. It's around between 2 and 3% that are able to live that sort of lifestyle by choice and have the standard of living of being able to go overseas on vacation whenever you want, to exotic places and that sort of thing. So there's very few people can do it. Some of these people go onto online, I don't know, TikTok and whatever, and have videos of themselves making, again, eating the organic $100 a pot organic honey and so on. But the idea that they're all out there and they're everywhere and so on is quite absurd. There's very few people that can afford to live that lifestyle, and many who do, or any who are able to do so, usually quite temporarily. So they do so until the money's all gone or something like that. So if anyone's out there sweating about this leisure racism, then there's a very small number of people who are able to live that way. On the bimbo side of it, I've come across this. There's a guy who was made a lot of money, and he was quite a plump guy. He certainly wasn't even slightly fit, and was borderline corpulent. But he came across a fitness trainer in a gym, and a very simple lady, and decided to marry her, and of course she lives that life of leisure is referred to in this sort of leisure racism type thing, or leisure enslavement. Now, the other side of this coin, though, is that, and some of the complaints by white women, that if these 2 or 3% of white women are living this lifestyle of leisure, if there's even that many, and that would be at the upper end if there is, the women that can live this life of leisure, then they should be out on the streets waving placards about, climate change, that not enough black lesbians are CEOs of corporations, and they should be out there, for this social change, pushing for social change. Because as we know, the fascist Nazi Hitlers are running everything, and only this real pushback by courageous women waving placards in the street is going to change this social change, this thirsting, this lust, this need for social change, I say. And these women should be out there, these leisure women should be out there, fighting the good fight and fighting back against the man. The reason that they have to do this is because all women are imprisoned and chained. Black lesbians are taken out the back and shot. In education, only straight white males are allowed to go to school and universities. Only straight white males. So these are the things to be deeply concerned about, and you've got to fight back against those sorts of things. And the way to do it is to get on the street and wave placards, because no one has any rights. Nazis are in control of everything. They won't let you do anything. Now, how come you can go on the street and wave placards then? Hey, mere detail. Forget about details. So now, just sort of to understand this, we need to have a look at the postmodern feminist movement. Now, if we look at sort of the 1960s, there was a push to sort of have younger people voting, and some of the issues around just young women in particular, but young men were being sent off to, say, Vietnam as an example, by conscription. So they had no choice in the matter. If they didn't go, they could be sent to prison. Many were. But these men didn't have the vote. The vote was for 21-year-olds and older. So there was movement to put the voting age to 18. Now, there was a concern that the feminists had that the vote would be given to men who were 18, but not to young women, because young women didn't have to go on the front line and get shot. So there was a view that young men should get it, because if they're going to lay their lives down for the country, which is what they were being required to do, then it's only reasonable that they should have a vote. There are other sort of caveats that were being discussed at the time that say the vote wouldn't be given university to 18-year-olds, but it would be to anyone who'd served in active duty, for example, would get the vote. Anyway, ended up that everyone, all 18-year-olds got the vote, and that spread to other countries, Australia as well, Britain and so on. Now, the feminist movement in the 1960s was made up almost exclusively of Jewish women and lesbians, and many Jewish lesbians at that. So there's a particular group of people who had no interest or investment in having relationships with men. So they wanted to carve out a special category for themselves, saying, well, we're not interested in men. We don't want a relationship with men. But we want to have access to the opportunities that men have, and in terms of employment and whatever else, the opportunities that men have, but we are a very small and unique group with unique needs based on our lifestyle and the lifestyle we'd like to lead. That is a lesbian lifestyle. So, but instead of, they couldn't really go out and say that, because there was still a lot of laws that said that homosexuality was illegal. So now, it wasn't heavily enforced, but if there was a big public sort of display of it, then the authorities would tend to move in. But if it was done quietly, then there wasn't really the sort of oppression that the gay community or lesbian community likes to talk about or likes to pretend that existed. But if we look at the feminist movement, those were the people. Now, what surprises me, and I'll mention some names here, the Schulamith Firestein, or Firestone, as she's called. She wrote a book called The Feminist Revolution. I think she wrote in the late 1960s, I think it was. Hester Eisenstein, Ellen Levine, Kate Miller. The list goes on, but I think it seemed my point. They're nearly all Jews, nearly all lesbians or bisexual at the very least. There was a smattering of Jews who were straight, but they didn't like that they'd come from rather devout Jewish families, and they rebelled against the sort of the rabbi sort of led type existence that was required by their family, particularly by their mothers. They usually fallen out with their mothers more than the fathers, and they wanted to sort of go and lead a Gentile lifestyle. Now, some of them were they still wanted to hang on to a lot of Jewish practices and attitudes and behaviours, but they wanted to be fully accepted in the Gentile sort of life, and were quite irritated and annoyed when they weren't. There was a few in the group who were brutally unattractive, but who lusted after the hottest looking Gentile men, and were outraged and very bitter that they couldn't get the super hot Gentile guys into the horizontal position, and became very militant activists as part of that. So again, the group was very unrepresentative of the wider community, very unrepresentative, and they couldn't highlight to the Jewish and the lesbian angle because that wouldn't have got anywhere. So they had to make it, and they did it rather well. They used the same sort of promotional tactics as their forebears had done, and still do today, following the Holocaust. So, using those same sort of things of the universality of it and the universal guilt of all people that may not agree with them, and so on. So they were pushing this quite hard. Now, they decided to start in certain areas. The vote was sort of one momentum of its own, really, at the time, driven by the Vietnam public relations disaster. Now, on the other side, they were looking at, trying to attack marriage as an institution, because the lesbians saw that as something that was against. Betty Friedan's another name. She wasn't a lesbian, though. She was an editor for a Soviet communist Marxist newspaper, and simply used that same sort of writing style to write a book again in the 60s. I think it was called The Feminist Mystique. You can probably still get it actually on Amazon. So, and this was, her comment was that marriage is a caged hell for women. Now, at the time, men made enough money, and the purchasing power of the paycheck made enough money where something like 60%, 65% of women didn't need to work. You could have a nice house and all the mod cons, a car, an annual vacation in the US, down Route 66 and all that sort of stuff, and could put 2.6 kids through school. College wasn't widely not that many people went to college back in the day. Some did, but nowhere near as many as today. So life was very livable on, the paycheck of say a factory worker or something like that. An accountant in some suburban accounting practice would do okay, and so women didn't need to work. Now, if you wanted a higher standard of living, if you wanted to have extra holidays or whatever, then you would work. A lot of women did work part-time for something to do, particularly as the children got older, particularly if they got into the later years of high school, or when they started work, the women would go to work and that sort of thing. But the way the family was structured at the time was that there would be a breadwinner and a homemaker, and they would combine together to make a successful family outcome. Was every family outcome successful? Of course not. Were many? Yes, many were. A great many were successful. And I know a lot of people who came from loving very together type homes. Equally, I know ones that didn't. It's interesting that the homes that were were cut with divorce and all sorts of turmoil. And in every case, those women had been exposed to the Marxist feminist thing of, did you know you were oppressed? No, I didn't. Well, you are. How am I oppressed? Well, blah, 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 blah. And did you know? And so on. Who made the decision as to what sort of car you bought? Well, he did. There you go. Oppression. That's it. Marxism. Hey, oh. So this sort of thing was they wanted to attack the family first, and they did this through California with the joint property ownership laws, where in the event of divorce, everyone owns an equal amount, including the members of the family. So if you've got two children and a mum and a dad sort of thing, then the two children and the mum own 75%, technically own 75% of the total property. It doesn't matter who contributed or not, they just had this 50-50 rule in California. So that was the first place the feminists went to, that where they would get their biggest and quickest and most decisive victory. And California became the divorce capital of the world. And interesting, it was Ronald Reagan, the future president of the United States, who was governor of California, signed that into law, and he's surrounded by advisors that. And Reagan was one of the, really the first globalists along there, including his amnesty for those illegal Mexicans and so on. So Reagan later claimed he regretted doing that, the signing that divorce law thing into law in California, but he could have vetoed it, but didn't. So this was where they started in the family law thing, or the divorce law thing, which then subsequently spread around. But even back then in the 60s, they were very well funded. They did a lot of traveling. They went to the hotels, and so this wasn't a bare bones or a shoestring operation at all. They had lots of money behind them. It'd be interesting to know where that money came from back in the 1960s. They were given book publishing deals. They were given places on speaking circuits. They were given a lot of opportunity to get out there and spread the feminist message. Who was paying for that? Was that an early globalization funded operation? It'd be interesting to find out. So this was the postmodern feminism, and then it gradually sort of drew in more people. Things like, did you know that the wage gap and all these ridiculous inventions and propaganda inventions that they engaged in to sort of bring in this idea of you're all oppressed by the wicked patriarchy and the like. I mean, very little of it was true. And they also used, again, as I mentioned earlier, this universality thing of if one woman is beaten by her husband, then all women are, or if one woman is denied a job as CEO of the bank, then all women are being denied CEO jobs, and the list just went on. And then it just grew and grew. Affirmative action. Why are there not equal outcomes between boys and girls in school? It's because of oppression, because of patriarchy. And so they're able to do this and get away with it. And if you look at the amount of white male politicians that went along with it and supported it, they were clearly globalist flunkies even back then. Privately in Australia, I spoke to politicians that make public speeches all the time about how women were being oppressed, and you meet them privately and you're having a chat, at a dinner or a lunch or a function or this or that, and they scoff and laugh at it, how silly it is and what nonsense, and shrug their shoulders. Oh well, it's popular with women and it helps me get elected and all this sort of thing. I don't know. Was that it? Was that all there was to it, or were they unaware of the consequences of what they were doing? But that's the latest fad in leisure racism and leisure enslavement and a little bit of a history lesson on postmodern feminism. You've been fantastic today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.